Amer back with another Mission Impossible episode review. This time I'm reviewing from the revival season 2 episode 13, which is called The Assassin. So this one starts out in Geneva with a minister of some sort talking to his aide before a press conference. The minister starts talking to the press, and the aide's watch's alarm goes off with a tune that I think is supposed to be Moon River. He pulls out a gun and shoots the minister, then basically commits suicide by cop by allowing the guards to take him down. As he dies, a red mark on his neck throbs. Jim goes to a carnival and uses spy speak to get his disc player inside one of the rides. The mission, there seemed to have been a spate of these high-level killings where the trusted assassin dies shortly thereafter, and the IMF must figure out who's behind it and stop it. The IMF then heads to Boston and set up shop on board a harbor ship that's closed for a few days. Research has found that the commonality between all of the assassins is that they spent time in Philip Westerly's stress clinic, and Westerly himself has been spotted in some of the killings. The IMF heads to the clinic and we get the usual deal of Grant tapping into the communications. Inside, Westerly is having an online meeting with people around the world, bidding for what appears to be his assassination services. The bidding occurs, Grant gets a tap just in time to hear the closing bid of $1.5 million, but that doesn't give the IMF any leads to follow. Next stop is a racetrack where Westerly likes to unwind. Shannon chats him up, showing him her husband Max and talking about the stress of his life and their marriage. Meanwhile, Nicholas checks into the clinic as a belligerently alcoholic reporter named Brian Carmody. So Westerly excuses himself and asks Shannon to get Max to agree to check himself in. Nicholas has a session with Carmody, lamenting his job demotion and begging for help to get his act together. Carmody injects him with something before Nicholas can react, knocking him out. He makes a call to his buyer, saying that he's found a candidate for the kill tomorrow, and the IMF is able to trace a call to a stolen South African mobile phone. Westerly calls Nicholas's employer for confirmation of his identity, and Jim intercepts the call to do so. Shannon and Max check into the clinic as Westerly applies a tiny implant into Nicholas's neck, waking him, and then starting a hypnotherapy session with some weird lights, and then some images of jungle predators hunting and killing their prey, finishing with a soothing rendition of Moon River and a nice new wristwatch. The next morning, Nicholas joins Shannon and Max at the pool and then strangely says that he doesn't really remember much about what happened in Westerly's office, other than feeling really relaxed. Max says he heard the animal growls from outside the office, and they both wonder where Nicholas got the watch, upsetting him as he starts to walk away. Max tries to get him to open up out of concern, as Westerly watches from his office, and as Max continues to talk, Nicholas relives the jungle hunt footage and sends them both tumbling and struggling into the pool, and staff take Nicholas's Carmody away. Shannon reports the incident to a concerned Jim, and Westerly tells them they're no longer welcome at the clinic because of the disruption they're causing. Nicholas has another session and then gets into Westerly's car on his way for his task, with Shannon and Max following, Jim and Grant not far behind. Westerly spots them and heads to the racetrack, telling Nicholas he's been granted the chance to get an exclusive interview with a rich sheik who's been involved in peace talks, and the IMF figures he could be the target. Max is able to subdue Nicholas with a tranquilizer dart, and the IMF take him back to the ship, with Jim and Max staying behind to keep an eye on Westerly and the sheik. Grant heads back to the clinic to get in through some underground tunnels he found, pretending to be one of the lawn care staff, and manages to get to Westerly's seemingly unlocked and unsecured office, finding his implants and the jungle footage. Westerly gets back to his car and sends a signal, activating the chimes on Nicholas's wristwatch. Shannon tries to stop him from leaving, but he tosses her over the table, starts to choke her violently, suddenly stops and heads away, elbowing her back down the stairs and knocking her out. Nicholas takes a equipment kit and a pistol with some ammo on his way off the ship, heading to the zoo and hearing the jungle noises, taking a picture of one of the workers and then heading into one of the service buildings. Jim and Max return to the boat and learn what happened, realizing that the sheik was a decoy, and Grant discovers that the implants are living tissue triggered by adrenaline, disappearing without a trace after the kill. They also discover subliminal footage and a shot of the victim from the tapes, and that the target is an African leader named Kumbutu. who will be giving a speech at the zoo. Nicholas makes a mask from the picture he took of the zoo worker, while the IMF search for Nicholas near the lion exhibit where Kumbutu is to speak, and Westerly is also watching unseen from a distance. Nicholas slugs the poor worker and takes his uniform, donning the mask. Grant finds the kid and warns Jim about it, while Max finds a worker gagged near the building and spots Nicholas wearing the mask, allowing Jim to step in his way to buy time so Max can take Nicholas out. Westerly appears in the crowd, and Grant gives chase, alerting police. Westerly trips on a cord and falls into the lion's den for the all too common Disney villain death. His screams trigger Nicholas's implant, which fades away, allowing him to return to normal, though confused, and the IMF make their exit. Mission accomplished. I'm going to give this episode a grade of C, kind of on the border with C minus. It's really a remake of the season 6 from the original series episode Mind Bend. It has a lot in common with that. It's, at many points, it's almost the same script. This one, I would say, is a little bit better than that episode. I actually went into watching this again and preparing to do this review and giving this episode a much higher grade. I noticed a lot of things along the way that kind of brought it down a little bit. I would say that this episode is better than Mind Bend, but for purposes of the discussion, there's a lot of counterpoint, which I'll go through. Visually, this episode is way better than Mind Bend, of course, just by the fact that it's made in the 1980s instead of the 1970s. There's neater visual effects. In Mind Bend, of course, it was drugs that were used in order to, make a subject amenable to, the hypnotherapy that was involved in that one. Here, we've got this cool looking implant, and they can use some special effects. So it looks a lot better. It's also interesting how in this episode, there's the added bonus of allowing Nicholas to be able to use his agent training to become a kind of an extra level of assassin. In the original episode, it was Barney who basically became the assassin. And there was no evidence in that episode that, his ability to be an agent and be able to use some of the knowledge that he had as an agent helped him to, become, that extra level of assassin. But Nicholas is able to do it here. And I think that's actually a good thing. That's a point in favor of the episode. This is also a great episode to showcase Thal Penglis as Nicholas. He really needed it, frankly. It allows him to be himself for most of the episode. And like Greg Morris in the original, he does a fine acting job here. I really like the way he was able to shine and really make the most of his minutes during this opportunity. It's also kind of quite jarring to see him throw Jane Badler and her stunt double around. That was, that was something. And Jane Badler's been getting a lot of abuse over the last few episodes, so let's see if that continues. I don't remember for sure. I have a feeling it doesn't, but we'll see. There's a decent degree of difficulty here. That was my original comment. I'm going to stand by it a little bit. The IMF doesn't quite know what to expect in terms of the specifics of the plan that they're going to have to implement. They have to figure some things out along the way. They have to do some detective work. But once we kind of find out what it is the IMF have to do and who they have to go after in this Westerly guy, it seems kind of crazy to me that, what the IMF determined, it doesn't seem like the IMF had to do a whole lot of detective work that couldn't be done, say, by, regular old law enforcement to figure out that, hey, all of these people attended the Westerly clinic and, that sort of thing. Finding Westerly at the actual killings, and some of them, Like, I can't believe that it was that difficult for somebody to figure out. It was the IMF really required here. I kind of question that. Although overall, for the actual plot, the story, yeah, it's an okay degree of difficulty. Further to that, the mission the mission briefing that Jim gets through the disc player, it kind of gives it zero specifics about anyone who might be involved, and I don't know. There's something problematic about. This seems like one of those kind of very generic missions that kind of could go anywhere, and that's a little bothersome to me. There should have been more there. Anyway, a couple of other little nits and notes before I kind of get into stuff that's not good. Peter Curtin, if he looks familiar, who played Philip Westerly in this one, he was also in last season's episode The Wall as Colonel Botts. That's probably where you recognize him from. I have to point out a nit. I lived in Boston for a few years. There is no Boston Zoo, as Shannon puts it. There's a place called the Franklin Park Zoo, and there's a couple of other smaller zoos, but there's nothing that's called the Boston Zoo. Just had to point that out. Other things that I thought were interesting. I pointed out several times where the IMF, their use of technology or the use of technology in these episodes seems very, very prescient. And I actually found a couple of examples here. Did Philip Westerly actually conduct an auction using the first ever Zoom meeting? 30 years before the company Zoom even existed? That's just amazing to me. I had forgotten about that from the last time I watched this. Like, oh gosh, this guy's running a Zoom meeting in 1990. I did some research and I found though that there's some problems with that. The I said to give Westerly kind of the benefit of the doubt here. Okay, maybe he's using some kind of fancy setup with video phones or something like that. However, the first video phone wasn't released by AT&T. It wasn't even invented at this point. It was invented in 1992. So despite, it doesn't matter how rich Westerly is, the technology did not exist at this time. And then later, Grant talks about how the phone number that Westerly dials it was to a mobile phone that was stolen. So, okay, 20 years before this was even a thing, Mission Impossible predicted burner phones. It's kind of like The Simpsons in a way. It's so amazing, some of the stuff we've seen this season. You know how The Simpsons is kind of able to predict a whole bunch of things just in some kind of crazy, serendipitous way, like predicting that Donald Trump would become president and things like that. Yikes. This show is doing the same thing. I also don't understand how there could be a video call, like I said, because video phone technology did not even exist. And, even if you grant that, okay, somehow or other, the buyer in South Africa has a camera of some sort, and that's how he and Westerly can see each other. If he was using a mobile phone, he'd have a cell phone up to his ear, but that's not happening, right? So anyway, there's a little bit of weirdness there, but it's just interesting to see the prescience of technology here on this show. Lots of fun. I love watching that. Like many episodes, just about all episodes, a large part of the grade is dependent on the quality of the villain. Philip Westerly is a better villain, how could he not be, than the hapless nitwits that were in the episode Mindbend. The problem is that that's kind of faint praise. Westerly is a little bit better, but he's so lame because of his pride and arrogance. Why does he have to show up at the kills, potentially tipping people off with his presence? And that kind of makes him rather schmucky too. Like, there's no reason for that. As a matter of fact, there's a whole lot of reasons why he doesn't want to be there, or he shouldn't want to be there, I should say. Is he unengaging? No, I wouldn't say that he's unengaging. He does have a really punchable face, like Leonard Fry from Mindbend, who I said had absolutely the most punchable face of the first 6 seasons. but I wouldn't call him unengaging. So he is lame. So he's got that kiss of death. He's kind of schmucky in some of the things that he does, and but he's not unengaging. Although he's really kind of close to the line. So he's not a failure as a villain, but boy, there could have been a whole heck of a lot there. It is kind of cathartic to see him fall into the lion's den. I will definitely say that, even though that is a pretty lame Disney villain death. But you know what? Under the circumstance, there's a lot of problems though, plot wise, especially when it comes to Westerly and everything to do with the mission specifically surrounding. First of all, he doesn't lock his office. I don't even see Grant using like a pick lock or anything like that to get into his office. Apparently, he doesn't have any real security whatsoever. You know, for somebody who's doing what he's doing, to have zero security, not even an alarm in his office, is just completely ridiculous. And it makes him really not smart at all. There were also a lot of problems with the action as it takes place at his clinic. Max and Shannon, of course, go in because they want to make sure that Nicholas is okay, and they want to keep an eye on Westerly, of course. And you know, when there's that scene at the pool, when they confront Nicholas out in the open, and they call him by his real name, you know, especially out loud. Shannon at first, you know, Nicholas, you know, sits on one of the poolside lounge chairs next to her, and she kind of says to him quietly, "Nicholas, are you okay?" Yeah, that's reasonable. There's no problem there. But then when he and Max start talking and raise their voices, he calls him Nicholas. That was fairly dumb. Anyone could have overheard that, and you know, any of the workers or anything like that. We can certainly hear it when we see from Westerly's perspective as he's watching them. Uh, like it's really dumb the way that the IMF just kind of, you know, almost blows their cover in a sense by doing that. And yeah, there was something really bothersome there. Not only that, but after that whole thing happens, all Westerly does is he basically tells Shannon and Max to get lost. And it bothers me because given what he saw, you know, he should have heard them call you know, Nicholas by his proper name rather than Brian Carmody, and that should have tipped Westerly off that, hey, there's something going on here. He does seem to be kind of alerted to something going on, clearly, because he pulls, like, you know, a double cross in a way on the IMF by going back to the racetrack with Nicholas and making them believe, and you know, he realizes he's being followed, so he makes them believe that maybe that he's going after the Sheik, or you know, something like that, because he kind of has another plan. Given what happened, even if for some reason he didn't hear them call Nicholas by his actual name, why would he let Shannon and Max go? Isn't it possible that maybe they know too much? He should have had somebody go and watch them. Maybe he should have kept them confined and said, you know what? No, you have to stay here now, you know, so that they don't cause any trouble. That would have made more sense. I don't know why the writers kind of didn't see that. That was really strange. Not only that, but then this causes a whole other kind of problem. In that, the whole premise of the episode kind of changes. And this is something I didn't actually realize until I watched it again, you know, a little bit more critically. The voice on tape tells us during the mission briefing that all of Westerly's killings have been done by somebody who was very close to the target. Well, this is a problem. Nicholas is not close to this guy Kumbutu that he's supposed to kill at all. Like they're completely unrelated. Not only that, but Nicholas's chime is used differently than the first assassin that we see. The first assassin hears, you know, the chime and then realizes, okay, it's time to, you know, that's his trigger. Nicholas's trigger apparently is different. Nicholas's trigger is time delayed and say, okay, here's the time, and then it's, okay, you've got 1 hour, and then you've got to kill this guy. How did that happen? Maybe Westerly reprogrammed him in the second session that he had, realizing that something is going on, maybe thinking that somebody is onto him or whatever, but this is never made explicit. It's really, really strange. And not only that, it's not explained. The point that I made previously about Nicholas not really being close, somebody who's like in the inner circle of his target, where is that coming from? All of a sudden, Westerly is changing his MO. It would have taken something like 30 seconds for, the writers to have put in there that maybe that this is kind of like a rush job or something like that. And like what would have made more sense would be is if he was contacted directly instead of having this auction, for the sake of looking cool or whatever. Just have the South African contact call and say, Westerly, I have a rush job for you. There's $1.5 million in it for you. I need this hit done tomorrow. Kind of like they did in the original Mindbend, where that was all kind of planned out in advance. That at least, from a plot standpoint, Mindbend has that advantage over this one in that at least the plot was a little bit more, was actually not a bit more, much more consistent. Had they done it in a way similar to that, where they actually explained why, the MO that Westerly needs to use changes up, I think that would have made a lot more sense. The guy from South Africa said, I need it done tomorrow, or else I'm going to expose you, Westerly, or something like that, which might have made Westerly a little bit more desperate. That probably would have been better. Just to kind of bring that to a close, I mentioned that while Mindbend from the original series was not a great episode, as a plot, as a story, it was much tighter than this one. The screenplay here and visually, the way that it plays out, is better. But yeah, the plot holes here really do bring it down, and there could have been so much more here, I feel. This is another one where the IMF seems to really carry the idiot ball as well. It's not just Westerly. It seems that the IMF's original plan was to have Nicholas go in as a reporter, try to maybe find evidence about Westerly's next kill or whatever. But it seems like a huge oversight for the IMF to not consider the possibility that Westerly might do something or try something or give him drugs or do something like that. Like, did they never considered that possibility at all? It doesn't make sense. Why would they send Shannon and Max in after him? If they didn't have some need to be concerned. It seems like, this is another case of the writers just wanting to kind of put forth a story and not seeing some of these really obvious plot holes where it makes the IMF look kind of incompetent. And I really wish that they didn't do that. I wish that they had taken some time and tightened up the story a little bit. A fun episode, neat to watch. I hope that everyone was able to enjoy it and just, for its entertainment value. I was entertained. I'm pointing out these things because, that's what I'm doing here. I'm telling you what I think is good and what is bad. But overall, still an entertaining episode. I am going to stick by my grade of C for this one, though, because of those plot holes and the untapped potential that we could have had. And I think that's about it. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. We've got 3 left. We're coming down to the end of the series now. Not long to go. This has been a lot of fun. It will continue to be a lot of fun. There'll be more to do even after the reviews are done. Please like this review video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And please leave your comments about this and other episodes. Thank you again, and I will see you next time.